Can you hear me now? Great. All right. Let's start with you telling us a little bit about who you are and why you want to be Maryland's next governor.
Sure. So, good morning, everyone. I heard a little bit of the conversation before, and I must say you are a lively bunch. Either you are caffeinated, or I can tell you've got the enthusiasm that I know full well Maryland teachers have. So, let me first begin by saying, as a proud daughter of Maryland public school teachers, as a proud product of Maryland public schools myself, and as a proud mom of a future Maryland public school student who is some here in the crowd along with my parents, I want to say something that you probably don't hear enough of, which is thank you. The honest truth is I would not be here sitting before you today as an Obama alumni. I had been Michelle Obama's policy director. I wouldn't be sitting before you as an Ivy League educated Marshall Scholar or as a candidate running for governor were it not for the dedication of Maryland educators at every level. So my story is in so many ways the story of Maryland public schools. My family left a civil war when I was 9 months and came to America. My parents were about to head to Nigeria because that was the only country that they could seek refuge in when, just in the nick of time, they actually won, you could say, golden tickets to come to America. They had no jobs, $200 in their pockets, and they came to Maryland, and fortunately my father became a Baltimore City public school teacher. And yes, he's been amazing. And I will tell you that he worked in the Baltimore City public school system for 37 years. He just retired this past June at the age of 80. And he started at Edmondson High School, then he went to Frederick Douglass, then he went to then he went to Southern before it became Digital Harbor High School, and then he finally retired from Western in Baltimore City. My mother started out at Poly High School. She then, at the age of 62, went back to get her PhD, and she taught at and retired from Morgan State. So I mean it when I say that I am literally ingrained in my DNA is the Maryland public school system. I myself, as I said, am the product of Maryland public schools, and I started at Woodbridge Elementary. I went to Edmondson Elementary, then Woodbridge Elementary. I went to Johnny Cake Middle School, and then I graduated from Woodlawn High School. I appreciate that because sometimes when I say Woodlawn High School, people only know it by the Serial podcast because of the murder that happened at my high school. But it was so much more than that. Because for me, I had the chance to go from Maryland public schools to Yale and Oxford and Yale Law School only because I had the best teachers in this country, but not just this country, but frankly the world. And I realized that my life story could happen in no other country in this world except for America and here in Maryland. I'm the only candidate in the field who is the product of Maryland public schools from kindergarten to 12th grade. And the truth is that in the recent past, we actually haven't had a governor who has been the product of Maryland public schools from kindergarten to 12th grade. The last governor that that's true for was Governor Schaefer. And I want to make sure that that changes in 2018 because I know that the most important investment we can make in our state, in our next generation, is in you all. Because what you are doing, what people would say to me about my parents is what you're doing is God's work. And I realize that too many times we leave you all behind because I realize that too many times we don't invest in the most valuable asset we have in the classrooms, and that is our teachers. The reason I'm running for governor is because we need in this state an education governor. A governor who realizes that what you do every day makes a difference when it comes to educating our kids, when it comes to revitalizing our economy, when it comes to supporting working families. I know when we were growing up, we only lived on my father's salary. So at that time, it was $7,000 a year. And he's old. He's somewhere in the crowd here today. He's not quite retired, and we would spend $350 a month on the apartment, basement apartment, and so 60% of his income, of the family's income, went to that, to just paying for our rent. And I know that even at that time, he would still end up spending on school supplies, on poster board, on paper, even as our family was struggling, because he knew that that was the only way he could give every child every chance to succeed. And that's what I know that you all do. You make sure you do whatever it takes to invest in our next generation, and I want to be governor to support you all.
Thank you. Second question, what is your vision for public education, and how will you prioritize your education initiatives in the light of the work of the Kirwan Commission and their expected recommendations later this year?
Oh, if only I didn't have just 4 minutes to answer this question, because we all know that there is a lot that needs to change. And under my administration, we will make sure we change it. The first and foremost thing is, obviously, we know that money matters, and we have such a strong imbalance that we need to correct. At least $2.6 to $2.9 billion is what we need to invest in our schools. But we need to be strategic about how we make those investments. I myself know from my experience going through the Maryland public school system that we need to first and foremost make investments in the physical infrastructure of our schools, but also make sure that we're improving the working conditions of all of our educators. I remember looking out of my classroom when I was taking algebra at the supposedly temporary trailers where many of my fellow students and teachers had to learn. I remember that we would, under sweltering heat, have to try to focus on what our teachers were telling us when we couldn't actually deal with the sweltering heat because we were all sweating. I remember that at my school, you couldn't drink the water. At my father's school at Western High School, you were actually prohibited from drinking the water because it was unsafe. If we can't even have potable drinking water in our schools, there's something very, very wrong. But it's more than that, right? We know how much we need to invest in teachers. I remember when I was in high school, I had a French class where halfway through the year we lost a foreign language teacher. The school couldn't invest in a second foreign language teacher, and so my teacher had to teach both Spanish and French literally during the same class. That makes no sense. This is where we need to have leadership that is not about career politicians. It's not about people who don't know our classrooms. It's about people who know how to get things done. And that's what I've done. I've worked at the highest levels of government. I was senior advisor to Secretary Clinton. I was Michelle Obama's policy director. 2 of our 4 initiatives were focused on education. It was about getting more of our American high school students into 2- and 4-year colleges, but it was also about making sure that girls got an education. But we also knew But you know, I just talked about physical infrastructure being a key priority, and teacher training, and making sure that teachers are invested in so we treat them as professionals and their salaries reflect that. But we also need to do the small things. I know the difference of making sure that children have hot and healthy breakfasts and lunches. I remember my father would actually take meals to school because he knew that kids were growing up in poverty, and that schools are the community centers through which we can help these people. We can make sure that they have parental support. We can make sure that they have the physical well-being that they need. But it's also about other things. It's about making sure we invest in universal pre-K. It's about making sure that we invest in STEM education. When I went to Woodlawn High School, it was a struggling school. And those are the schools that we need to make sure we're investing in. I was a molecular biologist in college because I got the investments in the education in STEM when I was in high school. Governor Schaefer invested in that. And I know we can do much more. I want to make sure that every school has at least $50,000 more in investment in science, technology, engineering, and math. But that's not what it's limited to. We're also supporting all of the other educations, arts, humanities, because these are the building blocks of what is necessary to make sure that children succeed. And that's what I'm going to be here to do. I'm going to make sure that you have a friend and partner in the administration, because I have lived, both because that I was the daughter of public school teachers, but also because I was the product of Maryland public schools. I know what you're going through. I know that what you do is what is the difference between kids realizing their potential and not. And I wouldn't be asking for your endorsement, but because I know that I will be your biggest supporter. You have a friend in me, and I will make sure that we make Maryland the best public schools in the country again.
Thank you. That's all right.